Sorry. Now, if you select all of your clips you've repeated, and you right-click or control-click, you can go down to Merge Clips. You click on Merge Clips. Oops. There we go. It combines all those clips into now one new, obviously merged clip. So I can start editing this one individually. Now, starting off, it's a little bit annoying. However, this is what we can start with by then stretching or condensing the timing of this clip, also then getting into effects a little bit later on. So let's start with changing the timing first by either slowing it down or speeding it up. So I have this one clip, I'm gonna right click or control click, and then I'm gonna look for where it says stretch. And then there's a stretch mode, and I'm gonna click on real time. When I do that, you'll notice there's a little stopwatch symbol that pops up that says 100%. And then there's also these little two white triangles at the top left and right of the clip. When I hover my cursor over those triangles, I also see a stopwatch, and the cursor changes to a kind of left and right arrow. I can very easily now click and drag that out to make the clip a lot slower. Let's even take it to the extreme. Let's like really slow this down. Likewise, I can shorten the time, make it very fast. You know, that starts sounding more like kind of like again, maybe like a sci-fi engine or something. And you have to think, this is adjusting this visually, but you have to think kind of conceptually about how this timing change is working. So when you have a sound, an audio waveform, if you slow that down, you're basically extending that waveform over time. Now, when you do that, it is going to have more time between the peaks and valleys, the waves that we can see visually. And when there is more time between the various elements, like the different kind of rhythmic elements, it's gonna start sounding like a lower pitch. Now you'll notice it doesn't really sound that much lower here because Audition is trying to be smart, basically. It's trying to say, okay, you're slowing down this audio piece, but I'm going to try to keep the pitch exactly where it was, just at a slower pace. It thinks it's smart, and that's what gives us these artifacts. And you'll see when I have it extended, and it's kind of like that kind of like crackling sound. That is Adobe Audition adding information into the audio to basically make up for the stretching process, pulling those audio waves apart. It doesn't have to do that when it's squished, because then you have a lot of information in a shorter amount of time. So if you want to change the pitch where it's not trying to keep the pitch the same in its, in quotes, smart sense, you can click on that clip and then come over to Properties. If you don't see the Properties window, you can come up to Window and then click on Properties. And then you can see you have a pitch slider here. So I can pitch it down. Or up. Let me make this fast and you can see the difference again. So if I want to reverse this audio clip, I can select on it, double click. It opens the audio clip in the waveform editor. And then I can come up to effects and then reverse. That will flip it around. Now it's funny, with the clapping, it actually doesn't sound any different. This will sound very different, especially if you have, let's say, spoken word, which I know we're not using spoken words in this project, but if you use some sort of human voice and then reverse it, it will sound, again, very kind of spacey or sci-fi, whatever. That may be something that's worth kind of making the sounds feel a little less recognizable. Okay, next up, let's add effects. So again, depending on your workspace that you're viewing, you may or may not see the effects rack. I'm right now using the simple editing workspace. So these two little arrows here, if I click on them, I can select simple editing. And then you'll see on the left side, there's effects rack and properties. Properties is where I was able to view and change the pitch. And then beside it, in the effects rack, if I click on that, I see a bunch of these kind of empty lines here, like the power button symbols. That is where I can add effects, multiple effects, all working together on either a specific clip or a whole track. So when I'm talking about clips, I'm talking about these individual audio pieces here that I can click and move around. These are a clip. And then each of these horizontal tracks are called tracks. And so if you apply an effect onto a track through the track effects, it will apply those effects on every single clip that is in that track. If you only want to have an effect on one specific clip, you have to make sure you're clicked on clip effects. Now this is quite often an easy fix, but something that causes or is a stumbling block kind of in the editing process, because quite often students will be, let's say, selected on clip effects and they want to add something to the whole track and they don't realize they're just on clip effects, so they add an effect and it only changes one clip and they say, well, it's not applying the effect to everything. It's because you're not on the track effects, or vice versa. They only want to have an effect on one specific clip, but they are in track effects, and next thing you know, it's putting an effect on everything, and they don't want it on everything. So you just have to make sure that you are intentionally selected on either clip effects or track effects. All right, so on this audio file here, I have it selected. I'm just clicking out it with my selection tool. I'm going to add an effect just on this one clip. So I'm in my clip effects, and then to the right of this window here, there's a little arrow. If I click on the arrow, it opens up all of my effects within kind of submenus here. Everything from Delays, reverbs, modulation, those are the common ones that will quite often make some cool effects to work with. Reverb is very common. You probably know about adding reverb, especially for music. It's very common to have at least a little bit of reverb on vocals. It makes it sound more natural. Quite often, singers will record in sound booths, and you probably have seen a recording studio with a sound booth, and they have all that sound foam on the wall. That is there to absorb unwanted sounds, so there's no reflections and no echoes and strange things that are happening unintentionally. The problem is when you have something soft like this sound foam, or like we talked about before, where you record maybe some vocals in your closet with clothes, it makes the sound very flat and deadened. So what they end up doing is going back in and adding reverb to make it sound a little bit larger, to sound a little bit more like it exists in a real room. It sounds more like fuller, basically. So we'll just use the reverb. So again, this is what it sounds like without the reverb. Let me go to this section here. Okay, we'll use that section. This is what it sounds like without the reverb. I click on the arrow, reverb, press OK. They have a bunch of presets up here. I mean, you can tweak these manually, but just as a example, I'm going to do, let's see, bigger room ambience. Let's even make it more extreme so it's easier to hear the effect. So you can start hearing that. Again, I put on the robotic preset just as a way to really hear what's being added to that sound. So in this section, what started off as then adding a flanger. It's a little harsh, but now imagine if we took down the pitch. It might kind of soften things out a little bit. And see, just like that, it almost sounds, I can see that being kind of like a sandstorm, or, like maybe you're on a desert planet or something. Or you're in a hurricane. So we took those street sounds, whatever that audio is. It sounds like some people revving motorcycles or dirt bikes or something. Maybe at a show because people are also clapping. We took that sound, and then all of a sudden we have something that's like a sandstorm. I'm going to take the pitch way up. This may sound terrible. We'll find out. Yeah, it does. All right, so that is adding effects. Now, I used the flanger just as a way of showing kind of an extreme effect, but you can also keep adding effects. So all of these, what you see 1 through 16, I can go back in and then still add that reverb. So I know it's easy to have some of these sounds get like really harsh and abrasive, but if you notice what I've done there, it's taken it and made it much more subtle, much more kind of like ambient wind sounds. Or maybe there's some sort of something flying overhead. You don't have to just keep adding things so it sounds crazy. It can actually tone down the audio clips to make something a little bit more, maybe a little more nuanced. Okay, it can be interesting to have something, just some ambient sound like this. But what's more interesting is when you start layering these audio clips so that it creates movement. I want you to think about creating this soundscape as if at least you're on a walk. Like maybe you're walking through a new world, or walking through some sort of mental landscape or something. You can get as conceptual and out there with this as you want to. But regardless, there should be some movement. There should be something that changes over time that keeps us interested. As you are adding effects, as you are moving things around, you're going to want, again, to add something happening, something changing over time. So in the past, I showed this volume line where you can click on it, drag it up to make it louder, or drag it down to make it quieter. But you're probably wondering, as I also showed, that you can change the volume here and here with these little bars. Why do you need this line? Because this line specifically is how you change the volume up and down over time. If I click and drag it up and down, I can just move the entire line. That's the volume for this whole clip. But if I'm hovering the cursor over, the cursor changes to a little plus icon. When I click once, it adds an anchor point or a keyframe, depending on if you're more familiar with animation or graphic design. I can do it again. I'm going to add 4 of these anchor points, and now I can click and drag them down and up, and just again so you kind of see the difference, I'm going to add a bunch more so that visually we start seeing how the volume is going to increase and decrease over the course of this clip. So if I play that, I'm going to make it a lot lower so it reaches the bottom here, and now it's going to start increasing over time. You're getting louder. Now we get quieter again. So that is just a visual way to see and control how the volume changes over time. Now, that can actually be done. Well, next up is panning. Let's just go and see that first. So panning is how the audio is sent between the left and right channels. So if you have on headphones, that's where it's easiest to hear the difference. You have the left and right side versus, on a sound system, you can even be in your car, the left and right side of the speakers in your car. You can change this white line So we'll go from, it's maybe hard to hear in this room, but let's just go from left to right. If you are wearing headphones, you will be able to very clearly hear the difference because it's isolating the sound in your left and right ear. So the panning will take the sound from, in this case, 100% on the left side all the way to 100% on the right side and everywhere in between. So that's the panning. Now, let me take this back to, actually I can just delete these anchor points here. Now the cool thing is you can do the same process with any effect. All right, so if I want to start changing the reverb or flanger effects, up at the top right at the clip, where it's right now it says volume, that corresponds with the volume line here. There's a little drop down. And now it has the flanger and studio reverb as options. So when I hover over either the flanger or reverb, there's more options for all of the settings that can be changed over time. Okay, so in this section where all of these little squiggles are, there's a lot of things that are changing over time, and it did add a little bit. I know it's hard to hear some of it, but it did add some movement. If you were listening, especially on headphones, you would be able to hear the difference as these levels are going up and down. They're going to be modulating the sound in different ways, and that will add some dynamism basically into this track. Instead of it just being kind of even keel, same level all the way, all of a sudden now there's going to be kind of stuff interacting, and it will be changing over time. So that will make your audio clips more interesting. Anytime there's movement, it just keeps us ever so slightly more interested because there's something new happening. Some of the other effects that are common, we'll go through some of these. Let's look at the filter and equalizers. So under filter and EQ, a good one here is the parametric equalizer. If I click on this, this will basically analyze and again visually show you the frequencies within your audio clip. So let's take a look at this. So I'm playing it, showing it's pretty heavy in the lower frequencies. So these are the bass, mids, and trebles, higher frequencies. There's a lot of rumbling. I can see visually in this area. I can click on this part of the graph, bring it down, you hear so I'm doing that manually by increasing or decreasing the frequencies. This can also be a way to start refining the audio if it does get a little too rumbly or staticky. Quite often there'll be in this area on the higher frequencies there'll be a lot of static, like white noise. You know, if you hear that shh, that is going to be shown by these waveforms way up here on the right side. Sometimes that's very abrasive, and you might take down that area so that you get rid of those higher frequencies. Let's see if I can show that by increasing the pitch. So that increase of pitch, there's more of this kind of static over here on the right, but I can just bring that down if I wanted to get rid of it. Really trying to isolate one area. So this is a parametric equalizer. It comes in handy before seeing these waveforms, before seeing the frequencies. A lot of times producers will use some of these for visually seeing the audio so they know if there are kind of overwhelming areas, especially in the bass, or actually it could be anywhere. So that if there's, say if you're mixing a song, I got to the end of that. If you're mixing a song and you have vocals, instruments, and they're kind of competing with each other in specific frequencies, you can see that and then adjust it so that it brings those frequencies down. They don't cause any problems in broadcast.